Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitInWriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
Welcome to Insights in Sound, live from the NAMM show floor. My guests this morning are Mr. Frank Filipetti and Mr. Michael Beinhorn.
How are you, sir?
Just
you?
Ducky, and you?
That was not in order of importance.
Well,
was,
let's not get into that.
If it was, I would have introduced myself first. But come on.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway,
If it was,
we
you
are
would have
here to
introduced
talk.
Dave and.
we are. Dave's not here.
Oh, that's right.
We are here to talk about the topic is doing the work that the labels won't do. And what we're talking about really here is how the career trajectory has changed for artists now that there really are no label deals the way they used to be. It's really much more up to the artists now to not only learn what they're all about, but not only from an artistic perspective, but also from a marketing perspective and just understanding all that. So let's just start with the basic question: what's changed? I mean, aside from the fact that there's that could take at least a couple hours, but aside from the fact that there are no real labels anymore, is a label even? I mean, most of the people I talk to now don't even want a label deal. So what's replacing it now in the trajectory of the average artist who used to be nurtured and guided and all that stuff? Michael's getting this look on his face. I'm just waiting to hear what comes out of his mouth.
Remember artists and development budgets?
What's that? What's that?
What's replacing it? Basically rolling up your own sleeves and getting into it yourself, because no one's gonna fucking help you at all. That's the bottom line. No, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that we already know that the industry is kind of compressing, that it's kind of folding in on itself. One of the reasons is that the profit margins just aren't there anymore. The entire financial makeup and also the music, the delivery of music, the makeup of how music is delivered now, it's changed so drastically since the time that you and I were in our halcyon days making really great records. People just can't do that anymore. I mean, if you have a record that's big out of the gate, it's not a record anymore. It's a song off something, and it's essentially presented as files. And most of the activity happens, through streaming, but mainly YouTube. So if you have a song out of the gate that streams a billion times, or is seen a billion times over the course of
And you make 11 cents.
You make 11 cents. Exactly. But this is massive success now, But there's such a small percentage of artists that can do that. And one of the reasons for that is that the industry has also decided to focus specifically on genres of music. There's no focus on artists at all.
It's very siloed too.
What's that?
It's very siloed.
Yeah.
The different genres.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like Drake or someone like this, you've got that kind of recognition, and record companies have essentially honed their direction towards people that will do stuff like that. But basically, they're orienting all artists, and they have oriented over the past 20 years, I'd say, to kind of think in those terms. So everyone, and we've encountered artists like this who came out, who had their own thing. Like you actually introduced me to someone years back. Right?
Where they have more marketing savvy and whatnot?
No, this artist had her
savvy?
own thing. She had her own kind of unique sort of style and presentation. And she got signed to a development deal with Warner Brothers or something like that. And they just slowly smashed the life out of her. Just kind of down to telling her how to wear her hair, lose weight, They'd send her to this producer, songwriter, because that's all there is. Producer, songwriters. If you write your own music, you're going to these people, and they'll make you a hit. Of course, they don't make you a hit. They
make themselves a hit with you in it.
They're just getting paid to do the job. They honestly, in many respects, people at that level don't even really care that much, I don't think, if they're, realize this might be a little uncomfortable, but like, this has been my experience. They don't seem to really care as long as someone at the record company pays for the demo that they're making and the song that they wrote for the artist.
Well, and beyond that, you have the hierarchy at the record labels now is totally different than when we were doing it.
Yes.
Every artist had a representative, an A&R representative that represented them to the label, and that was their liaison. That was their go-to person. The higher up you were in sales, the more you got to the head of the label. But for the most part, the day-to-day business of your life was being held by the A&R person that represented you.
Who was also your advocate.
And they were your advocate. They also were involved occasionally creatively, sometimes to the detriment of the project, but nonetheless, they were involved. But they knew, at the very least, the artist and their market, and who they were projecting to. Now that's gone. What's taken its place is a series of accountants and people who are just determining what's the best way to maximize, not, let's say, Carly Simon or Korn, not to maximize Korn's profits, but to maximize the company's profits. So you have things like repurposing a lot of albums, catalog albums. You know, back when we were repurposing things for surround sound and so forth, the interesting thing was, because you were involved with the artist and the management and the A&R, everybody was kind of on the same page. Now, the record company who owns the catalog doesn't even consult with the artists anymore. The artist many times doesn't even know that their work is being repurposed for Atmos or whatever it happens to be, and the people that are hired to do it have nothing to do with the record.
Well, that's definitely in the case of legacy artists, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah.
So so you've got 2 or 3 levels removed now from the artist, and to be honest with you, we all know that we went from an album artist-oriented market to a singles song-oriented market. And nowadays, how many people stream an album? Usually they stream a playlist, which has nothing to do with an album.
It's usually a couple of songs. It's
Yeah.
not even like a full record.
Right. So really, when you ask what's changed, almost everything. Almost every paradigm that we used to operate under, size of budgets, how the album was, everything has done a 180.
Yeah.
And worked in a different direction.
And also the people running the companies are much different. They don't have the same orientation as they used to have when we were making records. I mean, you remember as well as I do that a lot of the people that we work with who are at the top of the food chain, they're music fans. I mean, the A&R people were music fans too. But these guys, bottom line was, they loved music. I remember one time I went to, I was working on a record for Geffen, and the budget was spiraling like egregiously out of control. And I started to freak out. And I went to the head of the record company, and I just had to lay it, I had to lay it down for him. And he just looked at me and he was like, just make the best record you can make.
You don't hear that anymore.
Yeah, my first experience with a #1 record was with Foreigner back early in my career. And I remember before I started working on it, they had been working on the album in England for like 6 months, and they came back to New York and they needed to start over because they were working with Trevor Horn. When they came back, Mick Jones said, I loved working with Trevor, except he doesn't know how to work with people. I mean, at that point, it was, Foreigner was a band, and Trevor's experience.
Right. Trevor's used to working with an
Yeah,
artist.
well, and also, piecing things together, not working from
Sure.
a band template.
Yeah.
And I remember 3 or 4 months into the project, we were already going over the budget because they had already spent
Yeah.
most of it in England. So now here we are, and the record execs from Warner's or A&M, I can't remember.
Atlantic, I think.
Atlantic, that's what it was. They came over and they said, look, we're really getting concerned about what it's costing to make this record. And so Mick sat them down and we played them a rough mix of I Want to Know What Love Is,
And they shut up.
and they said, okay, like you,
Yeah.
whatever it takes, fine.
Yeah, exactly. Because back then they could actually listen to a piece of music and go, okay,
Okay, yeah,
I think this
okay.
is gonna. I think this is gonna be all right.
This is going to be okay.
Yeah, but then the bean counters came in, and part of the issue there was because of the corporate mergers that started toward the end of the '80s. Remember the Time Warner merger?
Oh, yeah.
Steve Ross.
Yeah. We're pleasing shareholders now.
What's that?
We're pleasing shareholders now, as opposed to.
Well, that was the
creating
corporate
art.
mentality that was started in the '80s by the guy who ran General Electric. I think he was the first guy who really started to orient the corporate mindset not toward corporate innovation, but how do we incentivize the shareholders, and that whole concept spilled over into the music industry. And as a result, as time went on, and these mergers started happening one after another, all of a sudden you're not having people running record companies anymore who cared about music. They're essentially accountants. I mean, there are still people in the record companies who like music and are familiar with it and have big record collections in some cases, but that's not their first concern. Their first concern, as you said, is how do we make money and how do we please the shareholders?
Well, and how do we make the most of this new environment, this new monetary environment, the streaming environment? If you have a playlist of the top 10 records and that's what you listen to, you're not developing artists. You're developing, songs and songwriters maybe, but you're not developing artists, which is why when you see people talk about great artists artists that have lived for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and are still relevant, you realize because back then they built artists to have that kind of longevity.
Exactly.
Now it's
Their career could evolve over a series of albums.
Yeah. I mean, we're also complaining,
Well-
essentially about something that I feel very strongly is in the process. It's very slowly, but in the process of getting phased out. I don't
that's
think that
what
it can exist in its present form anymore. These companies are basically trying to maintain a claw hold in anything that they can. That's why they're trying to diversify into other areas. I mean, obviously that's where 360 deals come from. They recognize that their income streams from streaming is limited. Their income streams from physical product, limited. They're looking at vinyl going like, hey, wow, even though they were so happy to kind of kick it to the curb at the end of the 70s. They're desperate for revenue streams, and it can't last like this. They're not creating a fertile environment for new artists, and that's the most important thing of all. If you look outside of what the music business, as an industry that's very segregated, and the big two or the big three that encapsulate all those other smaller labels, there's so much other music being created. I mean, we're dealing with a massive glut right now. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, while I haven't heard anything song-wise recently that's remotely close to anything that we would have enjoyed from the past 70 years or more of great music, but there's been so much in terms of subgenres and things like that people are doing that are innovative and interesting. I can't say that musically it would be necessarily on a par with with the work of a Carly Simon, but it does give one a certain amount of hope. You know, there aren't real solid support systems for this, but it does exist.
Well, and now there's the question, okay? And there's what I really want to address in this panel. You just hit the nail right on the head. The next Carly Simon, the next Mick Jones, the next
Artist
artists coming up
development.
now. There is no artist development happening from the labels. What are we doing? What can an artist who's coming in now do? And Michael's raising his hand because he's got the answer.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Exactly. And
That's
what I want to talk
essentially
about.
what I do.
Well, and that's just it.
I-
You have
I
moved
had
into
a-
this space.
I had an artist that I found was very, very talented, very young, very inexperienced, and needed guidance. Now, years ago, the first thing I do is try to get a label deal and have them do, development on the artist. But I knew that didn't exist anymore. So my second phone call, after, talking to the artist's parents and say, I'd like to pursue this, was to contact Michael, because I don't know anybody else that's doing what he's doing right now. And I knew that as a producer and as an engineer, I have a lot of strong qualifications. I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of experience over the decades. But of all the people I've worked with, no one that I've ever worked with has the insight into artist development and the emotional context of art that Michael has. And the fact that he was just getting into doing this, I said, this is a perfect combination. But I had to go outside any label, outside any management. It was really a new kind of paradigm that Michael is actually instrumental in creating. And that was very important. And I think that may be the best and only way for artists to develop themselves now, because if you look at the music industry, it has no interest in that. It really doesn't have any desire to put money into a 5-year plan.
No. You're absolutely right.
Exactly.
You're absolutely
Exactly.
right.
So-
It's
so what are you
incredible,
doing?
isn't it? I mean, they've completely forgotten, or because they're essentially based in accountancy and don't really understand the essence of what the product that they're selling actually is. It's people, it's humans that can write music. Instead, they're spending tens of millions of dollars on developing AI that will create music, so that they can own the fucking copyrights and not have to pay anybody. They get all the profits. I mean, right now that's an ethical issue that's been raised with the Copyright Office in Los Angeles, and I think someone already lost the case, claiming that they own the rights to AI art, and they were
Well,
saying
but
that art,
AI
it wasn't created by a person, so you can't call it art, which is very interesting.
Well, but it's also interesting in the concept that AI is based on programming in existing art.
Exactly.
Yes.
So everyone
Yes.
wrote it.
Yeah.
So a bunch of creators actually provided the programming for AI.
Yeah.
But now they're not supposed to participate. Now
Yeah.
it's suddenly the AI's creation.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, that's because AI is kind of a misnomer, and it will be until someone actually creates artificial intelligence that's self-realized, that's self-actualized, because essentially it's using stuff that humans created. That's what all AI is. But this is what the music industry is basically sort of betting the farm on, that they're going to be able to create their own copyrights so that they'll own the music. They may be able to do something like that with machine-oriented stuff, but if you're talking about artificially creating an artist like another Joni Mitchell, good fucking
Ain't gonna
luck.
happen. Yeah. But talk a little bit about what you're doing, because you're not doing the artist development in the traditional way, even that label A&R people did it.
The thing is that like I'm working. It's interesting. It's in more of like a coaching setting and a consultancy setting. So working directly one-on-one with people and their music, but also getting into the psyche of the artist, like trying to help them find what their intent is. Like, why am I doing this? A lot of people go into whatever endeavor they do sort of unconsciously, right? Like they're drawn to something, and they don't think about it anymore. They just sort of do it. You know, I mean, it's the same way most people live their lives. They get up every day, they do what they do. It's kind of a...
People are always asking me, what was your plan? How did you get to where you are? And I say, plan?
What was,
Well,
plan?
I don't need no stinking plan.
Yeah,
right.
It's just let it happen.
It's just opportunities came, you took advantage of them.
Exactly.
I never thought long range. And as a young person, 14, 15, 16, who's just getting into creating music, there's no plan. It's just, I'm good at this. What it needs is that person, that mentor, just like a mathematician needs a mentor, just like a novelist needs a mentor. In this area, there are no more budgets to allow someone to experiment and try. So now it's very important that early on in their creative genesis that they go to someone like Michael, and who knows how to separate the wheat from the chaff, who knows how to direct. Because when I was a youngster, I thought I was a songwriter. I never even considered music, a production or engineering. I was a songwriter, and a passable drummer. But I just followed whatever the universe was throwing at me. And because there was money to be made somewhere along the line, it became a viable path for me. That's not the case anymore. And now you really have to get your shit together quickly and not take a lot of missteps. I took 9 years of missteps. Kids today don't have that.
No, they don't have that luxury at all.
So it's important now, without the backing of the record company, that you get someone involved right away.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing about it is that if you don't have that mentor, especially in today's environment, you're going to be more imitative as opposed to really finding your own voice as an artist.
You don't have a choice, and that's that is the mindset that the corporate, that the industry side of music has really foisted on everybody. That you have to fall into these narrow lanes. If
Hasn't
you're
that
a
always
rock
been
band,
the case, though?
No.
I mean, hasn't that always been
no.
Okay, not always, but since even in the time of, when you were working on like Foreigner and things like that, it was always the case that one band would come out, be successful, and then every label would say, I need one of those. I mean, that's been happening for a long, long time.
That's different, though. That's not the same as trying to use someone's success as a basis for something else has always been part of the issue. But now it's not a genre or a concept, it's literally individual songs. Okay. This song becomes popular, and now we're just going to create it, which is why it's easy for an AI to do these things, because it's not a whole emotional thing that made a band like Kiss or Foreigner or James Taylor or whoever it happens to be, or the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They were an emotional core, and they followed their own journey. But now it's literally Umbrella becomes a hit, and now there's 60, not artists, just songs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we talked about this yesterday, or I talked about it on a different panel, but a few years ago, I was listening to the radio, which I don't do very often, but it was a local alternative station in Los Angeles, and they did a mashup of about 20 or 30 of the most popular songs on the radio at that point in time. It was really extraordinary. I'd never heard anything like it before, because all these artists combined together, edited together, made up one song that was completely consistent, sonically, tonally, tempo-wise, key-wise, every single aspect, down to how it was produced.
Well,
every single aspect. There are templates and systems for every possible type of music, every type of genre of music that's considered popular. in the lexicon of popular music that's being released by major labels today.
Well, we
you know?
even see that, with Pro Tools templates that people are,
Well, look,
hawking
sure.
and stuff.
You've got this thing now where for the last 10,000 years that music has been around, the emotional center, the emotional core of music were two things. One was the rhythm or the groove, the drums or whatever it was. And the second was, if it was a vocalist, the emotional performance of the vocalist. Those were your elements, okay? And that's what resonated in here, somatically. Well before you got to the brain, processing, your body was already taking on the emotion of whatever that happens to be. Nowadays, the rhythm aspect is almost templated. So, certain types of beats and certain types of rhythms and certain tempos are templated. And on top of that, instead of the emotional core of the vocalist, we actually enjoy listening to a vocalist that sounds like a robot. That's actually important now that it has, robotic elements.
Yeah,
Take
yeah.
away all emotion.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to Vance Powell recently about this, and we were talking about auto-tune. And one of the things that he mentioned that really struck me was, he said a lot of singers that he gets coming in now, they're not even doing blue notes anymore. They're literally singing straight.
Dan, I got to tell you, like almost 20 years ago, I remember getting demos from this guy who actually went on to have like a hit through, I think it was BMG or something like that. And I was like, this kid actually, he's got a great voice, but they put a little too much auto-tune on him. And I spoke to the A&R guy about it, and he's like, there's no auto-tune on that vocal. And I was
Wow.
like, you've got to be shitting me, right? It's like, no. And I realized on listening to it more that this was something that had begun to happen, because there's a whole generation that, and this is much earlier on, but there are multiple generations of people who've come up hearing that as natural phrasing and imitating it in their performance style.
I had an artist, a young girl, who came to me to remix her album, and I listened to the tracks. I said, well, these are pretty good songs, let's see what I can do. So I spent a day in the studio and reworked the songs and spent a lot of time on the vocal. And one of the first things I did was I took the auto-tune off. I maybe tuned a couple notes, but then played with it, made it really front and center, and worked with the rhythm sections, took out a lot of extraneous stuff and really focused on the emotion of the song. And the next day I came in and played the tracks, and she said, oh my God, I love it. I love it. I love it. And she said, just one thing. What happened to the sound of my voice? And I said, what?
That is the sound of your voice.
I mean, it's everything I was thinking about, but it doesn't sound like me. And I said, wait a minute. I said, that is you. It doesn't have the auto-tune and all this processing on it, but this is you. And she says, yeah, I don't know. I was always under the impression that if you put a bunch of people in a room and you played them really high quality stuff, and then you played them an MP3 or you played them something that's processed, immediately you would convince them that this is better. High resolution.
Depends on the generation.
Yeah.
And I suddenly, over the last 20 years, have become aware of the fact that that's not at all true. Many people, when you put them in a room with an MP3 and a 96K 24-bit digital, they will sit there and prefer the MP3 because that's what they're used to. I call it mom's cooking, which is, you know, everybody loves their mom's cooking, you know, but
Actually, I didn't love mine, but
their-
okay.
but their spouse's, you know, their spouse's mom, like they can't stand it, but they love their mom's cooking, you know. So this is an actual effect. They actually become used to it, and before they can appreciate it, they have to be, you know, untrained. It's
Deprogrammed.
critical listening isn't what it used to be, where you could just play two things and say, this is obviously better.
The future ain't what it used to be.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yep.
But I mean that's what I'd like to do here is also provide some hope. You know, I love the fact that Michael is doing something like this. I think more people should be doing something.
Oh no,
like
they
this
will.
because-
They will.
Yeah.
Because people are already asked, and not people from just our generation, but people who are much younger. They go, you know, what's wrong with the pop music? What's wrong with this shit that people play on the radio? You know, you may be able to get 1 billion views on YouTube, but so fucking what? I mean, the song goes away in about a month or two, and then no one remembers it anymore. People are asking. They just don't have answers. But the answer is work with the artist, develop the artist, and it's going to become more and more apparent as this approach starts to take root. Also find ways to be able to meet artists kind of like at a halfway point, at a reasonable place. You know, I find that a lot of people who are trying to approach artists with, you know, will help you kind of like find a label deal, this or that. You know, there's so much like snake oil in there. And, you know, it's mainly about like developing your brand, how to kind of get more followers on Instagram and shit like that. You know, which is none of it has anything to do with the kind of music they're making and how they present themselves as an artist, but also who they are as an artist. Like, why would I want to listen to you?
Do you find though that complicates things because this generation of artists now are coming up more marketing savvy?
Well,
They
than
have
we
to
were.
be.
Right.
They have
so,
to
so,
be.
but
They have to
does
be.
that then work against them
No,
finding
because
their own voice?
They're comfortable doing that. We weren't.
Uh-huh.
I certainly was never comfortable, but they're comfortable doing that because they grew up with that. So,
No, yeah.
and the hopeful aspect is that now they can, if they have that ability, they can get out there and overcome the noise if they're smart about it. The sad part in that equation is that you could be a brilliant artist but bad at that and be overtaken by, you know, the promotional genius who isn't such a great, but that's been the case for music
Of
in
course.
general.
Yeah.
But the thing that concerns me most about all of this is I've always wanted to own a piece of my favorite artist. I've always wanted to own an album or a CD or a DVD. I've always wanted to own something that belonged to my artist. The fact that the kids today aren't interested in owning this, in a lot of ways, signals to me they're not really that invested.
That's
in-
not necessarily true.
No, but-
That's not necessarily true. There's a different degree of investment. It's more about the experience, the direct experience. The more recent generations are more they're more interested in temporal aspects of that kind of relationship, not so much like a solid, permanent physical one.
They want to go to a show.
Yeah.
You know, they want to experience the artist live.
And also,
I think.
they're not
Yeah.
material. They're not
Yeah.
invested in material objects the
Well, that's
same
true.
way that we are.
Yeah.
But-
You know, which is I feel is a positive.
There are positive aspects.
I hear
to
what
it,
you're
as,
saying.
as there is in everything. But for me, you know, do they think about what may happen if their streamer of choice goes out of business and they no longer have this stuff anymore? I can go back and go to the first record I ever bought, you know, back in 1962, and still play that. I don't know. There's something about the idea that they've become accustomed to going from one song by one artist to the next song by a different artist to the next song by a different artist.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't, if I start an album, I can't conceive, unless it's a bad album, of turning off the Beatles until I get through the
To
side.
the end of the side, yeah, yeah.
There's because they create an emotional arc with that record. A bunch of songs strung together doesn't create that arc. It's just a bunch of
No,
songs.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we are dealing with generations of people that are so vastly removed in terms of their experience of life, their experience of the society that they live in, and they've been so disenfranchised in many ways, and they've also been presented with a society that's really not friendly to them at all. They have to now devise their own survival mechanisms and their ways of being able to adapt to an environment that's completely unlike what we grew up in. I mean, come on, like 50s, 60s, like this is the American dream. Everyone was able to have their own home and, be a janitor in a school and be unionized and be able to send their kids to college and shit like that. If you're a janitor, you need 4 other fucking jobs just to be able to put food on the table right now and feed a family.
Well,
It's a whole different environment.
But to your point about ownership, because I think that's a really interesting thing. I hear what you're saying about the ownership being equating to commitment in a certain sense, but I think this is also a generation that has never known life without the internet. Therefore, they've never had an experience of, oh, my streaming service went down. I don't have this. There's no possibility of them not owning or not being able to access these.
It's a matter
tunes.
of relevance.
It's a relevance. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It is, and I think that's something we just have to accept. That I mean, listen. How many times did you move with your vinyl collection? Okay,
I still got the 60s, 70s.
There you go. Yeah, and this generation doesn't need to do that. They can move with their iPhone, right?
Yeah.
So there is that, and I understand the difference there. But I think the commitment to the artist just looks different now.
It just
Yeah,
looks
that could
different
be
now,
true.
exactly.
I know my kids growing up, they had certain artists that they were very committed to. And they'd want to go see them live and what have you. And so that may be true, but I guess I'm not used to the concept of not.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we're at a really interesting crossroads right now. People in these newer generations, they're here, and I feel like to a certain extent they're kind of unmoored, like they don't have an anchor, and that's why to a great extent, like I feel like we kind of owe them, to some extent, whatever knowledge and whatever wisdom we can pass along to them. They're entitled to be able to adjust and adapt to this world because it is going to be their world eventually, however they want or however they need.
That's why I think it's so important what Michael's doing, because he's providing a perspective that's very needed to the young people coming up in the world today, because I know when I get into the studio, I've worked with a lot of artists that have no studio experience, that have no idea about mic technique, that have no idea about song structure. They've just been doing this on their own at home and putting it together. And it's frustrating to me because I don't have the time or the ability to sit there and work with them hour after hour to mold these things the way we used to. It's not like we have an unlimited budget in the studio. We got to get it done. That's why what he's doing is critical today, and we need a lot more of it because there's no one else doing it.
Sounds like a good business model.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'll change eventually.
Well, and it
has
should. And to your credit, you have done this with artists for many, many years. You've developed some very challenging artists, shall we say?
Well, and under some very challenging circumstances. And,
Indeed.
And even to some extent, ending the relationship not on the best possible plane, but because it was important, whether it be a drug abuse problem or whether it be an insecurity problem, whatever, it was more important to him to kind of tackle that problem head on than let them perpetuate this year after year after year. And some people appreciate that at the end of the day and some don't.
Sure. Well, let's wrap with just suggestions, advice for young artists coming up now. Besides, call Michael.
No.
That would be
We'll
my-
flash his number on the screen, right? Call
No.
today.
I mean, people.
That's 888-623-800. 888-623.
Well,
That's not really his number. Anyway.
No, it's important, I think, for artists to really kind of to find their center, to really kind of investigate in themselves who they are, what it is that they're trying to do, why they're interested in this, why this means something to them, why they chose music specifically as a way to express themselves, what makes them different, not the same as everyone else, and also plot a strategy for how to go it yourself. If you're really, really good, in time you will attract all kinds of other people who will want to help you. It's just part of how things work. It's amazing how that works, actually.
Well, it's part of the zeitgeist. It's like, you write a song and you suddenly hear, 6 other people have come up with a similar concept, and it's out there. This stuff is out there, and you tune in. But the problem with what you just said is that it's not that easy to do self-introspection. I mean, I know a lot of artists who have been in therapy for like 30, 40, 50 years to try to get deep into what it is that their issues are.
Most of them.
And that's why it's important to have
Yes.
someone from the outside
That's true.
step in and say, look, you're looking at this the wrong way. Being objective about yourself is one of the hardest things there is
It's
to do.
hard.
It is.
And you're absolutely right. But with that said, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
You absolutely have to start somewhere. Even if you find yourself at an impasse, that's not a bad thing. If you find yourself at an impasse with introspection, that only means that's something that you're going to have to get through. Why is that impasse there? There's so many ways to kind of explore that particular journey, and it winds up being the greatest journey that you can take on every possible level.
Ooh, I love
It's
that.
a beautiful journey.
And the music was perfect for that one too.
All right, yeah, the music
All
was
right,
good for that.
all right.
I'll go along with that.
Michael Beinhorn, Frank Filipetti, thank you for being my guests. This has been
Thank you for having us.
enlightening
Yeah.
and highly amusing.
Thank
Good.
you, Frank. I love you guys
Yep,
both. You're
same
wonderful
here.
people.
And I will endeavor to create a soundtrack that is this emotionally moving before we conclude this episode.
No, why can't I?
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.